Northern Ontario, but seeing representatives from various other organizations throughout the province from across Ontario, I think deserves a round of applause for everybody here in the room. So congratulations. My wife and I just are finishing a renovation to a house that we bought on March the 1st. When people asked how the renovation was going, I quite frequently said it was slow and expensive and probably not different than anyone else who's been through a renovation. My son Jackson, who we'll talk about a little bit more later on, he refers to it as the money pit because I think he heard about that from his mom and dad over the years. But when I think about the game of hockey and I think about the opportunities that come from a summit like this or the discussions around the international summit just a little less than a year ago in Toronto, I think of a renovation. There's nothing wrong with the game. There's nothing wrong with the people in the game. There's nothing wrong with the experiences that we provide in the game. But there's an opportunity for us to make things even better. So it's not building a new house. There's no need for construction here, but a little bit of renovation, a little bit of fine tuning is never a bad thing. And taking the time and investing the time and taking the effort on a weekend like this, last night and today, to identify a whole host of things that can be looked at, I think is great for the game and will bode very well for the young participants in this province. Kars made a reference this morning this afternoon, he talked about the definition of insanity. The other quote that comes to my mind is, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And I think at times we get frustrated within the sport of hockey, but constantly we're doing the same things. So when the invitation came from the NOHA to say a few words, and I think there was a little bit of a request to talk about change and maybe a little bit of an opportunity to talk about some of the recruitment initiatives that we're trying to pursue, it was easy for me to quickly prepare some notes and identify some things that maybe we could talk about that would provoke some thought, hopefully wouldn't be viewed in any way, shape, or form as any criticism, but would provoke some thought on how we may be able to make some change, ultimately with the desire to make the game a better experience. I've said repeatedly, and I believe it wholeheartedly, that Hockey Canada is in the business of providing meaningful experiences. Meaningful experiences might be as a fan having the opportunity to watch Sidney Crosby score that goal, or watch the final of the women's Olympic team game, or better yet, having the experience a couple of years ago to be in Timmins for the World Under-17 Challenge. That passion that goes with being a fan is a meaningful experience for so many Canadians. You know, we routinely set record TV audiences for the broadcast of some of those international events. I think 27.5 million watched the final game in the Olympics where I think we beat the U.S., where we beat the U.S. in overtime. Not sure what the other 3 million were doing at the time, but that clearly it's a meaningful opportunity. It's a meaningful experience for people to enjoy that passion as a fan. It's also a meaningful experience to enjoy participation. I have a son who's 7, who's just getting into the game, and I'm having a great time watching him grow up, watching him learn to love the game, and watching him learn some experiences that are drastically different. Like, I can't believe how different the minor hockey experience is today for a 7-year-old than it was 35 years ago when I was a 7-year-old, I guess 37 years ago. So clearly we're in the business of providing meaningful experiences and meaningful opportunities, and I think you can talk about participation, whether that's entry level or high performance, or you can also talk about the passion that Canadians have for this game. Those two things together make the interest in hockey so much more prominent than any other activity that we have. Hell, I think we mark time when it comes to the sport of hockey, and we should be really proud of that. Tonight I want to talk just a little bit about some of my observations that I've learned as a parent. I think it's helped me shape some things in my own mind based on what I've learned not only in 20 plus years of being involved in an administrative role in the sport of hockey, but over the last 2 or 3 years watching my son experience the game and seeing the environment in minor hockey arenas just in the city of Calgary, but also interacting with other parents and seeing what happens at a minor hockey association level. I'll share some of the experiences that I've seen kind of through his experience, through his eyes, or my eyes through his experiences. I want to talk a little bit about some of our recruitment initiatives and some of the challenges that we're really facing. The number of participants in this game is declining somewhat. The percentage of Canadians involved in the game is not necessarily what we'd like it to be. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the great work that's being done from coast to coast by minor hockey associations and community rinks across the country to attract more kids to the game, but they need more promotion. They need more exposure to those great initiatives to draw people into the game. And then last week, our chairman of the board initiated a kind of a 6-point strategy. He and his fellow officers, of which Ed Kupich is one as a life member of the NOHA. He sits and has sat as an officer for a number of years with Hockey Canada. Ed and our chairman of the board and their counterparts identified 6 key priorities that they're going to focus on over the next 2 years. They're not priorities because there's problems. There's not priorities because there's a crisis. There's priority because they're an opportunity. There's an opportunity to make the game even better than it is today. If we look at players, clearly this afternoon, if you listen to the presentations, players are where our priority focus have to be. There's no question that officials are important, that coaches are important, that volunteers are important, but clearly the opportunity and the experiences that we're providing to players is so critical to the success of hockey programs. We have about 580,000 players registered in Canada, and my elementary school math tells me that that's just under 10% of the population between the ages of 5 and 19. And the first time I saw that, I was a little bit shocked. When I shared it with people, they were shocked that only 10% of that population group was registered within the hockey system. But then my mind started to wander a little bit, and I thought, you know what? There's a lot of businesses out there that would like to have 10%, but more importantly, have 90% that they can chase. 90% of Canadians between the ages of 5 and 19 have never enjoyed this great game. 90%. That's a great number that we can chase. That's a great number that we need to constantly look at. And you know what? I've come to the realization, and I'm a product of this, I think, and again, it's not a criticism, but I think our culture within the hockey system in Canada is we're really good organizers. If you knock on our door and you say, hey, I want to register my son or my daughter to play hockey, we organize you well. We tell you where you can go play. We give you a jersey and a pair of socks. We put you on a team. We probably put you in a league. We tell you when your practices are. We make sure that officials are there at the right time. The scorekeepers are there. We make sure that you're really well organized. But the challenge is we wait for people to knock on the door. And there's an opportunity for us to go outside the door and ask people to come try this game. If you think about the hockey experience or the hockey registration experience, it's largely an extension of tradition. My dad played hockey, so you know what? When I was 5 years old, I got a pair of skates. He put me in hockey, and I continued from there. My wife's father played hockey. I played a little bit of hockey, so there's definitely an interest in exposing our young son to the game. So we sought out and looked at and made sure that Jackson had an opportunity to register. Okay, what if mom and dad didn't play hockey? What if mom and dad are new to Canada? What if mom and dad are more predisposed to soccer or swimming or another sport or activity? What type of messages are they seeing? If you think about it for a minute, if you're not a hockey person, think about the messages that you might hear about the game. You'd hear in the playoffs about something that happened last night. Typically, the greatest amount of hockey content in the sports section is about some type of dust up or some type of problem. If you hear about minor hockey in the sports section, typically it's about a controversy or some type of challenge that's created. If you're at a cocktail party and there's a group there that are involved in hockey, quite often their stories are not necessarily about their son and daughter and the great experiences they had on a weekend trip to a tournament that was 3 hours away, and they stayed with a family and had to learn how to manage their money and how to act properly and how to handle themselves in a hotel, or at a team meal. It's not necessarily talking about the values of teamwork that are so prevalent in this game. It's not necessarily about all the great experiences and the great values that are developed in this. If you're not a hockey person, a lot of the things that you're hearing aren't necessarily positive. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to constantly work at and change that culture. The more that there is an opportunity to talk about all the great things that come from the sport of hockey, the better it is. Just a bit of a sidebar for a second. I remember being in grade 5. My mom and dad are both educators, and my mom, when my sister's a couple years older than I, and so when we were in elementary school, my mom stayed at home. But as I got a little older and got later into elementary school, my mom would supply teach a little bit, and she was in my school, which had its challenges at times, but more for me than her. And she was in my school and in the staff room at lunch. And my grade 5 teacher, her name was Mrs. Rogers, and she asked my mom a question. She said, "Joan, I noticed that Scott's away this Friday. He was away last Thursday and Friday, and in 2 weeks' time, my understanding that he's going to be away on a Friday. All of those are for hockey. Are you concerned about that?" So my mom, being concerned about education, her first question is, "Any issues with school?" "No." "Any issues with his homework?" "No." "Any issues with him keeping up or keeping pace with the other kids in class?" And the answer was no. And so my mom quickly responded by saying, "No, we think that it's absolutely important for Scott to experience those types of things. We think that minor hockey, and minor sport in general, but minor hockey, gives young people an opportunity to form a little bit of independence." My mom and dad were both teachers, and you don't necessarily have the flexibility of days off during the teaching week. So typically I was traveling with another family. My mom and dad my mom was quick to say that, hey, we gave him X number of dollars and he had to budget that for the weekend. He had to learn to travel with someone else as a grade 5 student. He's learning the values of being part of a team. He's a responsible team member. And oh yeah, by the way, he's getting some great physical activity and a great opportunity for some extra exercise and ultimately an opportunity to compete. And so Mrs. Rogers, who wasn't necessarily a fan of maybe minor sports or minor hockey and missing school, quickly turned into being a big fan of that and recognized that that was very much a part of a young person's development. So clearly, minor hockey or hockey in general has a great opportunity to develop the character and the skill set that is so important to young Canadians. When we look at when I look at the experience that I've had in watching my son Jackson, first and foremost, it's I'm amazed at the opportunities that are afforded to him and the experiences that he's had. You know, I try to explain this, that I can remember being a kid and one of my friends got a video game and we thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Well, it was actually Pong. And if you remember Pong, there were two little bars that went back and forth, and it was almost a replication of ping pong, and a ball bounced back and forth. And we thought playing that on a TV, it was a color TV, but we were playing that on a TV. We thought that was amazing. Well, my son gets frustrated if the Tiger Woods golf game on the iPad won't download quick enough. And it's amazing how things have changed. It's amazing when I look at Jackson's school experience. He's just finished grade 1. This year, it wasn't minor baseball. Little League Baseball was in Calgary, was looking to recruit new players. On 3 separate occasions, 3 different types of brochures came home in his daily agenda, which is the communication tool between the school and the parent. 3 different brochures came talking about Little League Baseball and just the overall program. The next one was how they would structure and seed teams and organize it on an age-appropriate and skill-appropriate level. And then the third one was more of a reminder. So Little League Baseball in this country has recognized that there's an opportunity to recruit and to push information out to and through the school system. Curling Canada has a program called Little Rocks. So if I understand it correctly, I wasn't around that day, but Jackson's explanation to me is that you basically have a plastic disc that on the bottom of it has casters, and they have the ability to replicate a curling rink in the gymnasium. So Curling Canada has a program that they run directly with the schools, and they exposed every elementary student in the city of Calgary. I'm sure they do it in other parts of the country, but in Calgary, every elementary school student went through and received that Little Rocks training and a Little Rocks certificate and a little brochure that connected to Curling Canada's website talking about registration. Jackson's been involved in swimming. Same thing, recruitment. Jackson had an opportunity twice this year to go to the gymnastics center over at Canada Olympic Park. Again, how did that happen? Through the school system, direct communication. He's been to learn how to snowboard. He's learned how to downhill ski at Canada Olympic Park. Again, all initiated by an active recruitment opportunity. I am confident enough in hockey that there's no question that if we expose those kids to our great game, we'll have more kids than we can handle. But we need to be a little bit more forthright. We can't wait till they knock on the door. We need to be going out and talking to the Jackson Smiths of the world and bring them into the system. If we talk about the opportunities and challenges ahead, so it's interesting, if you look back on Hockey Canada over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm going to talk high performance for a minute and tell you that we might be in our most challenging time. If you look at it, someone mentioned earlier today that we haven't won the World Juniors in a couple of years. We have been in the gold medal game for 10 years in a row. We won 5 in a row and had a couple of bad experiences in gold medal games. But our high performance program in the juniors has been very strong. Our women's program has always been strong, and I think it comes down to a little bit of the luck of the draw and a flip of the coin as to whether or not we take home a gold medal or the U.S. does. Our Olympic team, in the last 3 Olympics, we've won double gold twice. And you know what? All of that is to tell you that we've got to be careful we don't become complacent. So it's hard to stand here and say that, hey, with a bunch of gold medals in your back pocket that, geez, we got to be careful we don't become complacent. Some people may be raising an eyebrow or raising a question. But the fact that people will watch and see the international success, they may think that everything we're doing is perfect. They may think that we don't need to change. But we have to remember that the success or the effort that got us to that level, the effort that made us successful in 2010 winning the Olympics or winning a world championships, men's or women's or juniors, that success, that same level of success, never is enough the following year. So that constant effort and that constant drive to improve is what we need to focus on. And I think that trickles down into the grassroots system. We're constantly looking at ways and means that we can make the experience even that much better for young people, whether they're starting to play the game, whether they're that aspirational player, that teenage player that's really getting more focused on their training. They recognize that the women's under 18 or the women's under 22 or the national women's team is not that far away. They recognize that an opportunity to play at a higher level of minor hockey or junior hockey or whatever behind that is not that far a level. So that aspirational level, that aspirational athlete is constantly looking at ways that they want to improve, and constantly we have to challenge ourselves to make sure that we understand what they need and that we're giving them what they want. So if I talk about some of the challenges or more importantly, some of the opportunities that we have, I think ultimately we want to increase the number of participants. We want to look at ways that we can increase that 580,000 and we can start to cut into that 90%. So in 2 years' time, it'd be great for someone for Hockey Canada to tell you that, hey, only 88% of Canadians aren't necessarily registered with this organization. And we'll constantly chip away at that. I was telling Paul Carson earlier today that I did an interview after last year's summit, and I told people that it was 10%, and he said, well, what's the right percentage? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, how many Canadians do you really think that should be associated with Hockey Canada? And I said, 30 million. And he said, what, 3 million? I said, no, 30 million. In this country, because of the significance of hockey, hey, it's a lofty goal, but our ultimate goal, I think everybody in this room would share this thought. We all feel so strongly about this game. Our ultimate goal would be to share it with every Canadian. Every Canadian should have an opportunity to be associated with this game in one way, shape, or form. Not because they're going to win a gold medal, not because they're going to play at a high level, but because of all of the skills and personal characteristics that this game brings out in people. That's what we're in the business about, and it goes back to those meaningful experiences. So some of the things that we're starting to talk about are modified seasons. Why can't youngsters play hockey from September to Christmas and then play another sport after Christmas? Some kids may want to play from Labor Day to Easter weekend, and that's fine. But why can't we figure out a way for at a younger age or at a recreational level to have kids play in a 4 or 6 or an 8 week season? My son Jackson goes to swimming 6 weeks. He's done. Indoor soccer, I think, was 5 weeks. In hockey, typically you're committed from Labor Day weekend to Easter weekend for the most part. How can we create opportunities? If we do create those opportunities, can we attract more kids? Are there moms and dads out there that are hesitant to register their son or daughter in hockey because it is a long season, it is a lengthy commitment? Some of the information that we're starting to glean from a little bit of research that's being done by some universities across the country is there are issues with respect to perception on violence and safety. There are issues with respect to perception on cost. But one of the key barriers is the length of time. It's demanding. Some parents don't want to give up their entire weekend. I know that's hard to believe for a bunch of people sitting in a hotel room on the 6th of August, but you know what? It's true. And I've talked to some people who are athletic, have had great athletic experiences over the years, have had great hockey experiences, and they're hesitant to put their son or daughter in hockey because of the length of time. We've talked about making non-contact hockey a meaningful experience. If you really want to cut to the chase, how do we make non-contact hockey cool? How do we make it a solid experience so the 14-year-old kid can go to school and say, hey, I play in a non-contact stream, and he feels the exact same way as the young player goes and says, I play Bantam AAA hockey. Is there a way to do that? That's a cultural shift. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. But how do we create an opportunity for non-contact hockey to be cool? Because that'll have an impact on keeping kids in the game longer. We've talked about a better connection with university programs in the country. I think there's some challenges with respect to varsity hockey programs across the country. Clearly, it's a great opportunity for graduating CHL players, and in no way, shape, or form do I want to suggest that shouldn't continue. But there's got to be a way that we can create opportunities for junior A players to get an education in Canada and continue to play hockey. I don't know if that's JV programs or an association with a community hockey program in the university. Not sure, but we need better links with university hockey. The other thing we need to look at is and recognize that there are intramural hockey programs across this country, numbers by the thousands. Guys and girls who are playing intramural hockey associated with the universities. And again, that's all about getting people committed and staying involved in the game and allowing us to chip away and getting to that 30 million Canadians participating in the game. The next one can be a touchy subject. I know probably if you asked me 4 or 5 years ago, it would be touchier than it is today. But how can we align ourselves with private hockey programs? You know, if you look at it, being inside our system is no guarantee that a program is good, and being outside of our system is no guarantee that a program is bad. Bottom line is, how do we align ourselves with quality hockey programs? How do we set standards that everybody shoots for? How do we create a series of best practices? I heard earlier that there's another phrase instead of best practices, but I was only half listening, so how do we create some standards that we can all shoot for? I like standards. I like it. I like ways, I like measurements that allow me to improve. We're all competitive by nature. We all want to be the best. We all want to be the best that we can be. How can we create standards that we can all shoot for in programs? How can we compare what goes on in the province of New Brunswick and the province of BC and make sure that we're driving both to be better on a day-to-day basis? Whether that's a minor hockey association and running the organizational side, whether it's a minor hockey association looking to recruit new members, or whether it's a hockey program, a specialized hockey program that's specific to teaching skating or other specialty skills, what are we doing to make sure that we're driving all of those to meet a minimum standard, and hopefully year after year that minimum standard elevates? Because if it does, we're giving kids a meaningful experience. Freedom of movement. I'll tell you a true experience that we lived here in the last 4 or 5, I'm sure I have. So how ironic is this? So our little guy's 7. We go to the school because we're moving neighborhoods in Calgary, and my wife and I walk in, and we're a little guarded because we like the school he's at. He's in French immersion. We think that the environment there is great. So we walk in to meet with the principal, and we talk to Madame Kraus and say, we're moving from this community to this community. We understand that the community we're moving to isn't necessarily lined up with this school. But we'd really like Jackson to stay here. And she said, well, you drive Jackson to school? And we're like, yes. You pick him up every day? Yes. No problem. And so we were really guarded and almost a little bit sheepish, because we thought we were going to be told that no, he had to go to another school. If you really want to know the truth, my wife was ready to negotiate, figuring out how we were going to angle to get Jackson to stay at the school because we liked that experience, but we didn't have to. Minor hockey. This is 7-year-olds, so first year novice. This is as grassroots can be. Nope, can't stay there. So can't stay with the kids that he's played with the last couple of years. He needs to move to another association because he lives in a certain area. And to make it even worse, he's moving from an association that's overpopulated with 1,100 kids in one ice pad to a kid, because it's protected, with 2 ice pads and 475 kids. Now, my son will clearly benefit from that. He'll get more ice. It'll be convenient for us. Hey, that's great. But really, is that right? How do we figure out ways? Because you know what? In swimming, he can swim wherever he wants in Calgary. In soccer, he can play soccer wherever he wants in Calgary. He can go downhill skiing whenever he wants. And some of those things have an impact on participation. Some of those things have an impact on the experience. And again, I know, because we've grown up and our system is such that we need to place and we need to manage and organize, and we need to have some semblance of order. But my goodness, we've got to figure out some ways that we can equalize that opportunity a little bit better and give kids a freedom of movement. And if you really want to strike a chord on freedom of movement, so if I'm a 17-year-old swimmer in this country, I can swim anywhere I want. If I'm a 17-year-old soccer player, I can play soccer wherever I want. And you could go to any other activity, whether it's sports, arts, or culture, and I would hazard a guess that 98% of them, you can do that activity anywhere you want. But you know what? In Canada, if you're a 17-year-old, there are restrictions on where you can play. And again, it's not necessarily a criticism, but I'm trying to provoke some thought here. We need to ask ourselves, why is it that way, and is it right? If we look at recruitment overall, and our recruitment efforts are not necessarily the challenge. Our challenge is, how do we get more exposure for things like our skills camps, for our ESSO Fun Days that have been principally driven to increase female participation, have done a wonderful job. We have a Dreams Come True program. There are a whole host of, and I bet you if I went around the room, quickly we would come with a list of 100 different initiatives from the associations or the organizations that are represented here in the room. There's countless opportunities out there that are identified as recruitment tools or recruitment programs, we need some help to drive the exposure of those. We need to get above the thought that you need to knock on the door at the Minor Hockey Association and ask to play, and we need more exposure to drive that awareness and hopefully become not only an organizing sport, become a recruitment and an organizing sport. So quickly to close off, you know what, I think all in all in these points, please don't take in any way, shape, or form the tone or the comment in any way as a criticism. They're intended to provoke thoughts. They're not easy. Freedom of movement yields a couple of comments, and clearly would be a lot of debate, and it's not something that you snap your fingers and you fix, but none of these are. Clearly, we need to recognize that this is a renovation. It's an opportunity to make things even better than they are, to build on the great successes that have been in place for 10s to 20s to close to 100 years, and really build on some great opportunities about continuing to provide meaningful experience for at least 580,000 participants in Canada and hopefully a lot more. So to close, I think without question, you know, sitting here, just getting here late last night, but sitting here today, watching the commitment in the room, listening to the share of information and ultimately the collective knowledge in the room, there's no question there's the ability to make some of these changes for improvement. There's no question that there's commitment. There's no question that we could do it. The key question for us is, how do we prioritize? How do we identify the key changes? And how do we drive that change? And the challenge for that will start tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.